Hidden secrets and long-buried resentments come to light when two estranged brothers reunite at a primitive cabin deep in the woods of northern England. Anemone is directed by Ronan Day-Lewis and stars Daniel Day-Lewis, Sean Bean, Samantha Morton, and Samuel Bottomley. So, Jeffrey, what did you think about Anemone?
First-time filmmaker Ronan Day-Lewis, who is the son of Daniel Day-Lewis. They wrote this film together. It also stars Sean Bean. It's about these two brothers who meet in a cabin after one brother has essentially estranged himself from the family. Overall, it is a film that's pretty ambitious, and I think it has this distinctive mix of intimacy and also something almost supernatural and otherworldly about it. There's a lot of bird's eye view perspectives, both of the cabin and of the trees rustling, and there's a lot that's made of the wind and the natural elements, which almost gives us this indication that we're in some sort of natural storm that's gathering. So anyway, it's a film that feels like there are forces at the margins in some way that we don't totally understand. And it's kind of interesting to highlight that versus the intimacy of these two brothers talking to one another and figuring out why they've grown apart. What this does is it creates a really foreboding atmosphere, like a heaviness that's certainly in need of a resolve. And I think the film is certainly putting a really tall order on that resolve to achieve. And it has a fairly conventional outline of a family drama, even if the ways around it aren't the most common. But even in where the film withholds so much information and where it eventually ends up, feels a bit like an archetype, and I think not in the greatest way. So overall, that's what I felt about Anemone. I would say that I'm a little mixed. Ronan Day-Lewis certainly has a good eye for a variety of things, but this is a film that feels overwritten in the worst way and underwritten in the worst way. So, yeah.
I am pretty much on the same page with you. I was very conflicted about this film coming out of it because there are things that I do appreciate about it, but other things that I'm very critical of. Speaking a little bit to what you were talking about, this film is very impressionistic in its visuals, and every scene does look like a painting. And that makes a lot of sense because as we saw it in New York Film Festival during the Q&A, Ronan got to speak on this film and he talked about how he was primarily an artist before directing this film. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But I think taking his artistry from the physical format to like a digital one, like one that we see on the screen in film, I think is quite the leap.
Yeah.
You know, making a painting on a canvas is so different from making film look like a painting. And he manages to do that, I think, extremely well. As you said, there's these overbearing shots looking up, down on the trees, and the amount to which wind and sound is playing a factor in this as well. It just looks like the trees are rustling and they're moving like an ocean storm is brewing.
Yeah.
It was very cool look because
It's very evocative.
yeah. I got the impression that this was like a storm going over an ocean, but it's an ocean of trees. I think he deserves a lot of credit for just these moments looking so visually stunning. The visuals feel so dark and gloomy. There's these harsh shadows that are streaking along these landscapes as well as our actors' faces. Like, he has a very keen sense of how to use light in this film, which is just very harsh. Like, the light is always so direct and there's always these harsh shadows across characters' faces. So he was very specific in that intention because the film is really about this issue between these brothers as well as his relationship to his son. And that is a very tough thing to deal with. I mean, the film makes a decent enough point of showing that, yeah, this is a problem. Like, he has a lot of demons hiding in his closet that he needs to work through and trauma that he needs to work through. And that trauma is really keeping him from moving forward in his life, but it's affecting the people around him, which is something he's not really giving much thought to. And I think that's kind of like the journey of this film, is him giving thought to that trauma.
Also an unwitting theme of many films that we saw at New York Film Festival.
Yes.
Half of the films we saw were about men who didn't realize how much they were ruining their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's very true.
So,
yeah, Jake Kelly.
Yeah, we got a lot more to go. The Mastermind, Sentimental Value in some ways.
Gosh, really
yeah,
were.
wow. Yeah.
Last year, I feel like, was dealing with a lot of other different things, but similar things.
Yeah.
About like complicity and fascism and stuff like that.
yeah. That everyone was reacting to the Zone of Interest last year, and now everyone
all these
feels
films,
bad for white guys.
I guess.
I don't know. I want to go hone in a little bit on the visual sense, and I think that you're right in what you're saying. And there's so many memorable shot compositions, and I did notice that the color grading tends to vary a lot from scene to scene in a way that I found distracting. The film doesn't feel like it has an overall look or aesthetic, in my opinion. It seems to be changing based off of location, based off of scene. There's a lot of different color grading and different visual effects that are used. These sweeping shots that he'll come in for, and you'll see lightning in the distance that's clearly not real, but I mean, it makes a kind of cool effect. But there's something about the film that feels like, this sounds worse than I intended, but something about looking at something through like an Instagram filter.
Oh.
That I feel like it's a way of making and manipulating an amazing image, but doesn't look incredibly naturalistic, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
So there are ways that really distracted me in ways that I wish it didn't, even though it was very pleasant to look at.
I agree that I think there was different visual senses for different parts of the film, which maybe didn't come together in harmony, but I kind of liked that whole filter aspect that you're saying. I don't know.
Yeah, I found it a little chaotic. It was very painterly. It was like, had a wonderful composition about it. I like coming out of a film feeling like that film had a singular look, and I feel like this film has multiple singular looks.
Yeah. And I think the whole point of it being chaotic and looking chaotic is because there's chaos raining on our characters.
That's generous,
quite,
but yeah.
That's quite literally happening, near the end. We'll get into that. But beyond some of the acting stuff, which we'll definitely get into, that's where my criticisms start to pile up on this film, unfortunately. Going from there, I guess we should talk about the actors, because this is Daniel Day-Lewis's return to acting after quite a break.
Yep.
I think his last movie was it Phantom
Thread?
Yes, absolutely fantastic in the film. He's an amazing actor. And this seems like a role in which the script is bringing down his ability to shine.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier that I would really like to see Ronan Day-Lewis direct somebody else's script at some point.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
I will have more to say on that in a bit. Okay. I have to get a bit specific with that. But speaking of Daniel Day-Lewis here, he really does elevate the issues that I have in this script. There are some really great monologues. There's a monologue that's a little problematic for me towards the end, which I'll talk about in more detail in a bit. But before that, there's a great monologue in the cabin, which I thought was just fantastic. I thought it was a highlight of the film.
Is this the one that involves defecation?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious. At that point, I enjoyed the discomfort of the film because I didn't totally know what movie I was watching.
Yes.
And there was a strange sense of humor that scene brought. Kind of reminded me of There Will Be Blood, like when he says things like, I drink your milkshake, and you're like, is this like, is he terrorizing him? Is this supposed to be funny? But I like the discomfort of not knowing that. I thought at that point I was pretty on board.
Yes, that actually says exactly what I was thinking of. Just he pulls that off really well, that discomfort. You see Sean Bean's character sitting there in the chair, and he looks just like completely thrown for a loop. Like he almost doesn't know how to react.
Yeah. It's
a really well acted scene. And it really does give us a great sense of this character, that he is harboring a lot of things deep down, and he has to be really pushed to the point of no return in order to express it all. And in this case, what pushed him to the no point of return is all the alcohol that they were drinking that night.
Yeah, I have an ode to Sean Bean and Daniel Day-Lewis, because they were drinking a lot of whiskey. I agree with you that I thought Daniel Day-Lewis was great. Sean Bean, I think, is mostly in like a reactive state in the film, but I thought he was excellent, and I thought the other actors were pretty good too.
Yeah, there's a scene towards the end of the movie, the one that I'm going to talk about, the monologue. One of my problems with this is that Sean Bean is pretty much just sitting there reacting to this whole monologue.
I do think his face carries like a gravity. There's a world weariness to his face that I think brings a lot to the performance.
Yeah, he seems extremely concerned, and I guess that herein lies some of my issue with the script, is that a lot of these characters come across as maybe one-dimensional.
I definitely agree with that, and I think that has to do with, again, like going into the way that the film is structured. I think that the beginning of the film has this like foreboding, almost godly sense of these people meeting. We see them making these meager meals together. They drink together. They chop wood together. They run on the beach together. There's like such a quiet process orientation to it. Like I think that there's barely a line of dialogue for a half hour in this movie. I mean, there is a little dialogue, but it's mostly unspoken for the first like half hour or so. It makes it seem so like fatalistic in their meeting, and almost like we always knew that this day would come and it's finally here, and both the brothers are talking to each other, right?
Yeah, it's kind of dramatic. I do want to point out one thing
really dramatic.
That starts that first meeting is that Daniel Day-Lewis's character hears creaking outside of his house. So he wakes up and he grabs his axe, and the camera kind of like interestingly pulls onto his hand gripping the axe.
I liked this.
Yes, I really
Yeah.
like this as well. This was one of my favorite parts of the film. There's like this energy of like, oh, I think, somebody could be breaking in here. So he's getting like ready to actually use this. So you could tell he's nervous just by the motion of his hand around the hilt of the axe. And then you hear like a particular sound outside, which gives the impression that Sean Bean's character is like alerting himself to him, like in a way, like, it sounds like a secret communication
Secret
method.
agent. And he's before this, he's given exact coordinates. It's almost like a break in case of emergency type of thing. I don't know. It's just very dramatic.
It is very dramatic. He has the thing to cover his motorcycle in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. When he lets go of the axe too, then he just pours him a cup of tea. Like he just knows he's there. And that's again what like feeds into this fatalistic meeting of the minds. Going back to the structure of it, it spends so much time withholding information, and this is where I think the writing comes into play, it not being that strong, is the information that's withheld is really nothing new. It's revelations that I think you could essentially guess from the first half hour or so of this film, and by withholding them for the entire runtime, I think it unwittingly puts the audience in a state of suspense and expecting a large revelation that ultimately never really comes. And then reflecting back on it, that waiting can feel more like procrastination in the writing than it could feel like you were waiting for a revelation. So that's my main issue with I think the script.
I completely agree. It's this discrepancy between the visual sense, which is very overbearing and foreboding, and the narrative sense, which is not much. Like I remember during the Q&A, Ronan talked about Mother Nature acting, or the weather acting as its own character. I really liked what he had to say about that, because the way that the wind hits the trees from above is absolutely breathtaking, wild, and completely rough. You really feel like Mother Nature is bearing down on this scene. And I feel like the score complements this foreboding feeling by being extremely overdroney and punishing with these long-held singular notes. It's really overbearing, and it really signifies this mounting pressure. But as you said, as we get into the narrative of the film, it almost feels like all these things these characters are dealing with, the way the film feeds them to us, it's almost as if it could be fit on a post-it note.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the main issue for me, is that we need to go deeper than that. Daniel Day-Lewis' character had a really horrible thing happen to him that's displayed in this monologue, but that's the end of our exploration of that thing.
Yeah.
And then we're just to assume, okay, now we know why he looks so gloom and down all the time, and now we know what's weighing on him. There's a very, I think, shallow way of fixing that in the means of creating a resolution in the film, which doesn't really feel like a resolution, as you said, to me either at all.
The revelations that come at the hour 45-minute mark may have been better coming at like the 45-minute mark, and then we go further from there. It feels more like the script is fearful of giving us something. I'm a very big fan of like movies where nothing happens, so to speak, but many things are happening beneath the surface, and that's not really this film.
So going from here, I think it would be cool to get into the deeper aspects of the film, so that way we could talk about these specific situations that we come across in some of these scenes. I wanted to go back to our earlier conversation to one of my favorite scenes, which was this cabin scene in this first monologue. You are about to yawn, aren't you?
Sorry. Yeah, I kept it internal, didn't
It
I?
is kind of late. You tried to. I
kept
noticed it on your face, though.
Yeah.
You were like really attempting. There was a cool visual flair in this scene after Daniel Day-Lewis finishes this monologue, because it really is quite intense. And the camera just silently pulls away from the both of them and turns to the window. And this conversation had a lot to do with faith. The camera pulls away from that and it ends up on the window, which I thought was very cool, because the center of the window has the wood slits in it, which resemble a cross. So it was kind of like that show me, don't explain to me moment. And I really like that. But going from there, I do want to get into Samuel Bottomley's character, Brian, because he plays the son of Ray. His character is kind of like on the outskirts of this whole thing, and we keep cutting back to him in his bedroom. He seems to be very depressed. There's some things that are going on with him. He's very sad. This relationship ends up being like a main crux of the film. This son is in such a desperate need of help and an attention to his trauma. But I think his persona, his like own persona, is completely one-dimensional and avoided in the film for whatever reason. He's very sad. He's laying in his bed. Most of the film is him just like in his room.
It's true, yeah.
And so for me, it's just like, if the father is the catalyst for his unhappiness, or if it's something else, it's hard to tell. It feels like it's kind of the dad, but it could have been something else. I don't know.
And even so, that's so myopic, and so uncomplicated. Like,
Yes.
imagine if you could root all of the problems in your life to one little singular idea. I don't know. It's just really poor characterization. You can spin poor characterization, I think, with good writing sometimes, and this film can't really do that. Again, this person is just an archetype.
I feel like that would be okay if the film was attempting to go for this completely impressionistic, stylistic route.
Yes.
But it's not.
If this film's intentions from the start, and it has a little bit of this too, like we see this in the abstract imagery. By the way, if you've seen the trailer, I'm not spoiling any of the abstract imagery because I think every single one is in there.
Yeah.
The big fish, the weird creature
the big fish,
thing. It's all in the trailer. But anyway, there are some moments in the film where it has those, and you're supposed to have these impressionistic revelations about them, and I never quite found that. And that trope in films, like where you have a dream or you see the right thing at the right time that's symbolically resonant, is one of my favorite things in films.
Yeah.
But in this movie, it's so vague and so strange, and it
Yeah.
seems like so out of the ordinary for what's happening within the story that it never quite clicked for me. Like, if from the beginning this felt like a fable or a biblical story or like a story of caricature in some way where it's supposed to be an allegory, I think I would have felt very different about it than I do now. But I think the film is trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's trying to be like a biblical story, but also a deep psychological dive, and you can't really have both of those things. If you do, you have to be extremely skillful, and I don't think this film is quite up to the task.
Going back to some of these impressionistic odd moments, I can talk about one in particular, and this happens towards the end of the film. Like, we find both our main characters, the brothers, on the beach. They have this moment where they're sleeping, and Ray wakes up. And, well, he doesn't wake up. He enters a dream sequence where he's walking through this pool of water, and there is this figure or creature that...
Like a dinosaur type of thing?
Yeah, and it's ghostly. It's glowing in the
Like
light.
translucent.
Ray is walking up to it, and he's like interacting with the face, and it's very odd. This whole time, I was sitting here, and I'm trying to piece it together in my head. I was like, the film is making a point to show us this and be very dramatic about it. So what does it mean? What does it mean for our character in this particular moment? And I couldn't come up with anything.
I couldn't come up with anything interesting or anything that I could connect to the rest of the film.
And I think what made me solidify on that opinion is that later in the Q&A, this scene actually came up. I think Dennis brought up, he asked the question, like, that scene was very stark. Can you talk a little bit about that and what it meant? And he started talking about how he made this piece of art of this creature back in the day. And I think Daniel Day-Lewis might have helped him put it together.
Yeah, it was like a bonding thing for them. They helped put it together.
Yeah, and that's why it's in the film.
Yeah.
So that just
that's cute.
Yeah.
But like, it doesn't fit in the movie.
Yeah, it seems like a personal homage that doesn't add anything to our characters, yet the movie is treating it like it's something very, very important.
It has to be relatable to the film in some way that feels profound. And there's many, many examples of this, but the first one I thought of is, do you remember in May, December, how Charles Melton's character is... I think he's raising butterflies or something of the sort.
Mm-hmm.
There's the scene where he like lets one go.
Yeah.
And it's like mirrored through the screen door. But anyway, there's innumerable of these.
It's a brilliant shot. Yeah.
Yeah, there's innumerable examples of this. And like that one's really, really profound to me. It fits like really nicely into exactly what's going on in the narrative in a profound way. And I just couldn't make sense of these. It's not that I couldn't make sense of them in the good way, in the David Lynch way. It just felt so tacked on that I think it's just part of a different film entirely.
That cabin scene felt like part of an entirely different film, even though I liked it. There's this great visual flourish at the end of this sequence when they just get drunk and they start dancing with each other, and it's all slow motion. And this happens like twice in the film. But this first time I really liked it because we start pulling out from this cabin, and the whole wall is torn off the side of the cabin, so we see it as a set, and we're in the middle of the woods, and we're just pulling back as they're like dancing to this music. And I thought it was like extremely like ethereal and cool.
Mm-hmm.
If the film was going to be something, I wanted it to be that all the way through.
Yeah.
But it seems to get bogged down on so many of these other things because, like we said, it's trying to be something more.
Yeah.
It's trying to be something deeper about these characters.
So you ready to go to grades?
I am ready to go to grades. I am going to give this film a C+. At some point while watching this film, I think it was about like halfway, 3/4 through. I think once we get to the beach is when I started to recognize that the visual substance of the film was taking prominence over the narrative substance of the film. There's this highly stylized and dramatic approach to the film that clashes so much with the weight of the narrative aspects of the film, and they're just never in balance in this film. It's like the visual weight and then you have the narrative weight are just on completely different levels. The visuals, lighting, and score, in my opinion, I think are very harmoniously tied. And you do really get a sense of this emotional weight and pressure that's being felt by our characters in the film. But in the end, there's such a disconnect, like I said, between that dramatic weight and the traumatic reveals, which I think is given very little besides what amounts to this monologue on a beach, which is kind of towards the end of the film. Because of the writing in the film, even the way Daniel Day-Lewis says this monologue, I think it gets better towards the end. Like he becomes very emotionally and he's crying while he's saying these lines. And I think that part worked. But before that, it almost just seemed like he's reciting bullet points of his trauma. And I think that's just very problematic in a sense because it turns into this speechifying that the film has. It's like, finally, we're getting the info dump of everything, but all we're getting is the things that happened. We're not getting anything more than that.
The other thing, too, is he never talks about what happened in the war. We heard that early on, right? So what do you think happened in the war?
Yeah.
You know, you could guess it from the first 20 minutes. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It just felt like such a thud landing like that revelation.
So while I think the film is very well acted, the actors are very emotional at times, they're doing a great job here, I just felt like the script itself is just a bit hollow. And that pretty much sums up my biggest complaint with the film. I think these two aspects are just never on the same page, with the exception of maybe that first monologue in the cabin. But then again, it almost feels like that part of the movie is just an entirely separate movie on its own. And yeah, that's what I thought about the film. I feel like there's a lot of promise here visually.
Yeah.
I just need to mirror that with narrative sense, or just make a very stylized film that is hard to grasp, purposefully so.
Honestly, and I really don't mean this as an insult. He could make like visual essays and things of that nature that I think could be like really profound. I give this film a C. I'm kind of right on the same page as you. We saw 9 films in 4 days, and this was the most disappointing film that we saw, unfortunately. It's not like it's completely without merit. If you threw this on at some point on Hulu, like 6 months from now, I don't think that you would be angry about it. It's a movie that does have some merit and some interesting things going on. It's just, I don't know. It really needed a better script. And I know this is a first-time director, and I'm anxious to see him evolve. There's certainly things here that are very, very far from disastrous, especially his visual sense. They clearly thought about these ideas with a tremendous amount of depth. I think that there is a translation of those ideas to screen that it just doesn't hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. So I wish this was a little bit better. The performances are good. Some other good things about it, but unfortunately, I'm not sure it was totally worthy of this big hype of Daniel Day-Lewis returning to screen.
All right, so that's it for our review of Anemone. Anemone is going to be in theaters Friday, which, depending on when I get this up, it might be right now. So we'll see. Anyways, if you've seen the film, let us know in the comments what you thought about it. As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.